to blame Trump. That's the focus of tonight's angle. Wouldn't you know it, we solved a Twitter mystery. Well, it turns out, if you believe the left and the Never-Trumpers, Donald Trump himself may well have taken possession of Roseanne Barr's account and tapped out the tweet that led to the demise of her hit sitcom and her entire career. Now, listen closely. All roads lead back to Trump.
We know what Donald Trump thinks. We know what Roseanne Barr thinks. It's time for us to stop playing around with soft words by saying, well, they're saying insensitive things. No, it's racist. They're exhibiting racist behavior.
I'm not someone that has Trump derangement syndrome and blames Donald Trump for everything, but this right here, this kind of stuff is a direct byproduct of how Donald Trump behaves.
The thing that sort of is the background of all of this is that the president can be racist and nothing happens to him.
So now they do believe in guilt by association. Well, they didn't subscribe to that belief when this happened.
No. Not God bless America. God damn America. That's in the Bible for killing innocent people. God damn America for treating our citizens as less than human.
Even though President Obama sat in Jeremiah Wright's pews for years, marinating in that hate, well, we were told that Wright's comments were not representative of Obama's own beliefs. Well, this despite the fact that, unlike Trump and Roseanne, the Obamas were close to Wright. They were real tight. He was the president's spiritual mentor for years. And who can forget this 2005 gem that was conveniently hidden from public view by the photographer for years? Oh, that's a beaut. Well, we never saw that pic until Obama left office. Well, you see, the left protects and defends their own because they're immune to criticism for their unsavory political associations. But the president calls an actress and congratulates her for her rating success, and suddenly he's responsible for everything she's ever done or will do.
When you have a president that started his political career on birtherism, saying that he's not one of us, when he did everything he could to do dog whistling around this issue of race, people like Roseanne feel they're empowered.
What a fraud. This is the man who brought us the fake Tawana Brawley case. The man who defended the claims of the lying Duke lacrosse accuser when he wasn't, of course, evading taxes or shaking down corporations. And this is who MSNBC wheels out as an expert? Sharpton on bigotry and civility in America? Please. The left has to tag Roseanne's racial misdeed to Trump. Why? Well, because they have no substantive answers to the problems facing minority communities today. So their only recourse is to do what they do best, race bait and demonize their opponents. Meanwhile, President Trump is actually delivering undeniable results. We know unemployment among blacks and Hispanics is down to historic lows. We know he's trying to rid their communities of gangs like MS-13. And the president is now even working with Congress to pass prison reform. We'll get into a little bit that later on. All of this has caused his support to grow among minority groups, modest gains. But the left, of course, refuses to applaud any of Trump's progress or work with him, even on issues where they have common ground. That's how fanatical they are. Instead, what the left does is they plot a way on how to exploit the next moment of racial outrage. Here is how Hoover Institution fellow and phenomenal author Shelby Steele, who actually lived through segregation in the South, how he sees it from today on my radio show.
It's amazing to me that the amount of creativity and imagination that goes into sort of reinventing racism. Victimization is power and it's money, and these are people who are pursuing not a race-free world, a world free of racism, but these are people who are pursuing wealth. They're racial entrepreneurs. They're going to make careers out of this. Much of the black middle class today, sadly, is supported by through diversity work and programs.
Again, that's from an African-American man who lived through real racism, suffered through segregation. His comments. Well, people, of course, read Roseanne's tweet as racially biased, and it's totally understandable. She herself said it was indefensible. But there are other forms of bias routinely expressed by the left that stereotype and malign good and hardworking Americans every day. Remember the women who voted for Trump?
In light of this last election, I'm concerned about us as women and how we think. We have to have that conversation with ourselves as women. This isn't an external conversation because that's on us.
Another comments like the husbands might tell us what to do. Really? A black rapper who supports Trump.
Different celebrities desperate for attention and finding ways, whether it's positive or negative, to get it.
Now his wife is tweeting back at people basically saying, don't be too hard on my husband. Don't necessarily make it seem like he's going through some sort of mental breakdown, which we know he's had mental health problems.
We have the right to independent thought, and I independently think that Kanye has lost his mind.
Traditional Christians.
They get better and they claim to guns or religion or antipathy toward people who aren't like that.
It's one thing to talk to Jesus. It's another thing when Jesus talks to you.
Exactly. Okay, well, that's different.
That's called mental illness, if I'm not correct.
We're basically talking pretty much about any and all Trump supporters.
You could put half of Trump supporters into what I call the basket of deplorables.
Well, think about it this other way. If Trump created a safe space for Roseanne to write this inflammatory tweet, as the left is saying, well, maybe with that deplorables comment, Hillary Clinton inspired this.
Tens of millions of people voted for him after he showed his cards for years.
But are you suggesting that they're racist or they're...
Yes.
Yes.
Well, they're deplorables after all. Roseanne has now been excommunicated from the public square for comments that ABC rightfully characterized as abhorrent, repugnant, and inconsistent with our values. My question is, when will the day of reckoning come for those on the left whose own abhorrent and repugnant views are inconsistent with our values? And that's the angle. Let's discuss this with Dr. Susan Johnson Cook, a former advisor to Presidents Clinton and Obama, Horace Cooper, co-chairman of the Project 21 National Advisory Board, and Niger Innis, national spokesperson for the Congress of Racial Equality. Susan, your thoughts?
My thoughts, a whole lot went into that introduction. I think that she should have been released. I was very happy, and I applaud Iger for releasing the show. I think that we have to take responsibility for our actions.
What about all the other things, though, in that?
There was a whole lot pointed out, and most of the people who were pointed out, including Jeremiah Wright, who was my classmate in my DMIN program, they did suffer consequences for their actions. And it wasn't like they just got a slap on the wrist. I'm saying that, what she did was wrong, was deplorable. She compared a woman to an ape. And as a black woman, I think we've had to deal with sexism, racism, and classism.
That's all.
Okay, no.
We agree with you, though.
Okay.
We're not in disagreement on that. But what my point was a simple point.
Mm-hmm.
We care about Roseanne.
Mm-hmm.
Our point is that the left routinely maligns and mocks entire classes of Americans with impunity. And the point about Wright was not about him. It was about when he was questioned, President Obama, candidate Obama was questioned about, oh, you can't impute Reverend Wright's comments about US of KKK and all that on me. But he was a lot closer to Wright than, President's not close to Roseanne. He called her and said, congrats on the ratings. Big deal. They don't even know each other.
Okay, but the point is, we can be distracted.
It's about blaming Trump. That's my point. It's not about Roseanne. That's just
But we can be distracted. But a lot of people do blame Trump. In the intro, it also said how many minorities were growing in favor for Trump. You know, I sit in many groups myself, and that is not the reality. So we don't want to have alternative facts. We want to make sure
it's an actual poll. It's not my poll. It's an actual poll.
We don't have alternative facts. I sit in many minority groups, and I am a minority, and I don't feel that's the sentiment at all whatsoever. So I think.
Okay, so Reuters actually did a poll, and they've done several, and it's showing dramatic increases in support among Black people. And by the way, when I talk to many Black people, they do say this. But why don't we see when Alec Baldwin says to a Black man, uses the N-word in reference to him, why doesn't he get to have his show taken away? Why does Joy Behar get to say and post some of the most obnoxious things, and all we see are great accolades? What I'm just saying is, I'm not asking for anyone's show to be taken from them. What I'm asking about is, why is it the condemnation seems to only go one way?
The fairness question, Niger.
Well, it's simply because there's this belief that somehow minorities or Blacks can't be racist. That we can't, that certain groups, certain protected groups can't be discriminatory. And that's bogus. I mean, President Obama got elected and reelected after this controversy about Jeremiah Wright. And it did get a lot of oxygen. You know, to connect President Trump with something that Roseanne Barr said is absurd.
Van Jones said this today on CNN. Let's watch.
3 years ago, Trump came down the escalator, said stuff that was completely offensive to in the ears of most people around about the Mexican community. And we've just been in free fall ever since. And usually you want the president to draw the line. The president crosses the line every day. So it does seem that corporate America and the culture are stepping up to fill that void that has been left by this collapse in our political system.
Suzanne, now the left is saying the culture matters, which I'm kind of glad about that. That's awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, we've all been trying to talk about the culture for decades and a lot mocked by people like Bill Maher and others who don't mind the free fall in the culture. But now the left is saying these things matter. Words matter, great. Pictures matter, billboards matter, the way we represent women in songs matter. I don't care if you're Conway West or you're Common, who was at the Starbucks tutorial and featured in the Starbucks tutorial the other day. But is that really, did it all begin with Donald Trump coming down the escalator? I mean, we've had a free fall in the culture since like 1967 or something like that, if you want to go back.
Well, it's a loaded question, but I think that we can look
No, it's not a loaded question.
It is a loaded question.
Okay.
Let me respond.
Okay, it's a question about whether the cultural downfall began, as Van Jones implied, with Donald Trump and the escalator.
I don't know when it began, but I can tell you that the leadership has been divisive. And I think that that's caused the culture to really be explosive now. And I think Roseanne's was just one of the tipping points. And I think that Donald Trump's leadership has been very divisive.
Do you think Donald Trump's a racist?
Yes, I do.
Why?
I do.
Why
I think he said racist things. I think that he's alienated.
What racist things has he said?
Throughout his campaign, he
Name three.
I'm not going to name three, but you asked me a question. Do I think so? And I said yes.
What is this religion?
Niger.
I'm very disappointed in Susan.
You can be disappointed. I'm disappointed in you, but I mean,
you haven't even heard what I had to say yet.
No, but I mean, you can be disappointed in me.
I'm disappointed that you automatically just say that Donald Trump is a racist. That's a very
and the conversation ends.
And the conversation ends. Racism is almost, and you know this. Racism today. I mean, look. Can I just get a little word?
You certainly can.
Racism. Yes, you can, and you have.
Okay.
Racism is one of the most powerful words. We're speaking about words, and forgive me, my earpiece is falling out here. But racism is one of the most powerful words and weapons that is used in our culture today. It is not 1955. It is not 1965. It's not 1980. Even today, race and racism is a charge that is incredibly powerful. And for you to say automatically and somewhat, I believe, flippantly, that Donald Trump
is a racist? Was he a racist when he was having events with Jesse Jackson and Al Sharpton on Wall Street? I mean,
he's receiving
tell me. awards for being pro-minority.
You can receive awards, as you know, for many things. And so my point is, look at who
typically not for being pro-minority.
But look who surrounds him, and look who's absent from the table.
Who surrounds him?
Okay, who's in his cabinet? That's
He's his own man, for one thing.
Okay.
Does Ben Carson count, or does he not? We can just say he doesn't count at all.
I didn't say he didn't count. I said look at who's around him and look at the absence.
But I don't want to out them.
Elaine Chao, is she a minority?
Targets. But when Condoleezza Rice was characterized as a mammy in cartoon strips that ran in the New
she was
York
called
Times,
the house slave. Be very specific.
and another term that's close to that. Where was the outrage? Where was the condemnation?
Chris Hayes, let me just read a tweet.
What happens is we distract what actually happened. Roseanne, the question initially was Roseanne making outrageous remarks?
No. The question is about whether Trump should be blamed. We all agree on Roseanne's comments. We're all in agreement, which is awesome.
We didn't have that discussion tonight.
But this segment is devoted to, which is why the big banner on the show has been blaming Trump for Roseanne. That's what we're focused on.
There was a whole lot in the big banner that led up to it and saying that
Susan,
certain people on the left were not.
If I may actually run my own show. So that's what the focus is.
Yes,
Chris Hayes today agrees with what Susan said in his tweet. He said Roseanne's problem turned out to be that she far too authentically represented the actual worldview of a significant chunk of the Trump base. Suzanne, you would agree with that? That most of the Susan, the significant chunk of the Trump base is racist. Do you agree with that?
I do, and the people that I sit around, whether it's Reuters took the poll or not, I'm a minority, and I'm in circles that totally agree with that. Yes, very much.
So when surveys also show how many people said, I voted for Obama twice, and now I voted for Trump. When did they become a racist? These are white Americans that changed their votes, and in fact, these are also black Americans that changed their votes.
I think that the campaign fueled racism. I think that they appealed to a crowd that said, minorities are going to take your jobs away from you. Minorities are going to do this.
I'm willing to vote for Barack Obama, and I'm willing to vote for Trump because I'm a racist. This is religion.
Okay.
This is why people...
I thought it was interesting when I interviewed Shelby Steele today. I don't care whether you're a Democrat or Republican. He's simply one of the most brilliant writers around, period. And he said, look, I lived through the segregated South. Mm-hmm. And he said, I can't think of a better time to be an American today, of any color. We have problems. He cited societal breakdown, fatherlessness, obviously crime, despondency. But the family break, I said, what one thing is the biggest hurdle for people today? He said, family breakdown. Government cannot solve that problem. This is a spiritual problem. This is a personal problem that cuts across all racial lines. But he specifically focused on that. And it was just interesting coming from a man who had dealt with this. Sure. And he actually said, I'd love to have had my youth be as difficult as they say their life is today in the United States. Because he actually lived through it, Susan.
Well, my parents lived through the segregated South, and I lived in the summers in the segregated South. So I'm a civil rights baby. I've seen it from 57 all the way to now. And I think that it's more than a family breakdown. I think that there was an emotional, spiritual strength of people. Families were not always together. Let's remember the history of slavery. So families were not always together. They were pulled apart, just as many are being pulled apart today. But there was an emotional strength. There was a spiritual strength of people coming together saying, we are one United States. Let's try to forget what has happened in the past. Let's try to build something together. Let's build bridges.
Real quick. Got about.
It's a strange type of racist that you say that Donald Trump is, that talks about on a regular basis the record low unemployment among blacks and Hispanics and people of color generally. And you know what? I will not use that term that I think is critically important.
Gotta go, guys.
As a weapon.
Thank you very much. Really, I wish I could keep you guys all for the hour. You're fantastic. Trey Gowdy, by the way, seems to be at